we address them. So we've actually started a procurement for a consultant to help us with some of that effort, designed to, a year from now, introduce a new survey tool to help us get a better deliverable, what we think would be a better deliverable. So that's everything that I have for the employee survey. I can go back through anything or answer any questions. Rhonda, you can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Heather. Questions or comments for Heather? Seeing none, thank you, Heather, very much. It is nice to see such positive feedback. I think I noticed in a couple of them, it was the highest score it had ever been in a certain category. So very nice. Next item on the agenda. So discussion action items, review federal funding responsibilities and approve priorities. Heather.
While I'm here, I'll just stay. We put this agenda item on, one, because our board of directors has never adopted federal priorities, and we feel like that's important for us to have as we pursue many of the competitive grant processes that we're entering into. So we felt it was important to have our federal priorities adopted by the board, and then it also gives all of our board members, as well as our community officials, something as reference when they're having conversations with our elected officials at the state or even federal level. So we're all having that same message. So in order to adopt those federal funding priorities, I also wanted to talk about what are our responsibilities and how do we internally handle them. So next slide, Rhonda. So our federal funding responsibilities are handled mostly in-house. Myself and Kate Morley really look at all the different federal funding applications. We make determinations on projects, we assemble teams, and we are supported significantly by our finance folks, our planning folks, and our operations folks to ensure that what we're pursuing makes sense to the whole agency. We also have a federal legislative liaison. We're currently contracted with Nexus Consulting. We've been with Nexus Consulting for well over 5 years, and I really appreciate the representation that he brings to our priorities and our ask at the DC level, and the updates that he gives has been tremendous. And then of course we have all the transportation associations, ASTA, SWATA, CTAA, and APTA, and I know I gave you alphabet soup, but I did spell them out in the staff report. And many of those associations are important because they have their eye on that national picture. They have staff employed that constantly are evaluating and monitoring and really advocating for us. And that's been important. APTA has been a very important association as we went through COVID, really advocating for transit to be included in these relief bills. We also have once annual meetings with our different elected officials. We used to travel out there to visit them. We're getting ready to set up some virtual meetings. The American Public Transit Association, APTA, does hold an annual legislative conference as well that we have participated in. And then of course we have these quarterly communications when they're needed to really talk about our funding request, ask for support, or provide project updates. So we take all of that information and we then go into our federal priorities. Next slide, Rhonda. Can you hear me? Next slide.
Sorry, I couldn't.
Nope, that's okay. Federal priorities. So we do have these on a document that the board will receive, and I'm happy to forward it out to our Transit Advisory Committee members as well. Our priorities have 5 main bullet points under funding. So that's really reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act. It does expire on September 30, and we get about $2.5 million out of that, from that authorization that really funds operating in Flagstaff. We are asking that formula program funding levels be similar to those of the INVEST Act or the 2021 appropriations bill. We are asking that the set aside for the small transit intensive cities funding move from 2% to 3%. So that's about another 30% increase in our funding for meeting those measures. And we did receive in our 2021 appropriation 6 of 6 benchmarks. So that's about 1.9 million for our Flagstaff area. Along with other transit associations and companies across the country, we're asking for an increase to the bus and bus facility programs and to restore the bus grant funding to its historical share of 20%. Many of these things changed under the FAST Act, and we're asking for them to be restored to the prior billing limits. And then really to advocate that all grant applications foster the opportunity for small-sized agencies. So right now, sometimes we're competing with New York Metro on projects, and there's no scalability to ensure that we can participate in those opportunities. Next slide. Our priorities do include 2 COVID-related priorities, and so these are very short-term priorities. The CARES Act funding brought $7 million to Flagstaff because CARES Act was developed with the FTA formula award of funding. So they distributed COVID-19 relief based on that formula program. CRISA, the second act, did not provide any transportation funding to Flagstaff or really to any properties in Arizona. And that had to do with a formula that they added that restricted funding to anyone who had received 75% or more of their annual operating under the first act. So we're asking that they go back to and use the formula for any future COVID-related funds. The second bullet point is about how they appropriate funds. If they look at our service levels and our community levels during the pandemic, it could affect how much funding we get in our community. So we're asking them to continue to use the appropriation or the formula for appropriating funds at the prior levels, so that if 2021, for example, does have poor performance, it doesn't impact, or if 2021 has changes to the urbanized areas, that it doesn't impact our transit funding as a result of COVID. So very briefly, that's how we handle our federal funding responsibilities and our federal priorities that we are proposing the board adopt. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Questions for Heather? Seeing none, we will keep moving along. Thanks, Heather.
Erin, I have a question.
Yes,
Sorry,
Jill.
I was slow with all the.
That's okay. That's okay. Go ahead, Jillian.
Is there any discussion of restoring the federal part for transportation back to 80% from the 50% the Trump government reduced it to? I wonder if Heather has any information on that.
Yes, thank you, Member Thomas. If we go back, Rhonda, 2 slides, under the federal priorities, they increased the funding for bus and bus facility program and restore. That priority is really to return to the 80-20, so 80% to bus and bus facilities instead of the current 50% under FAST Acts. So that is something that the transit associations are pursuing, and it's something that we have put in our priorities as well.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I hope it all goes through.
Me too.
Shane.
Well, way to go, Madam Chair. Listen, Heather, just a comment. I applaud the effort for Mountain Line to jump into this, what I consider best practices, and that's identifying these legislative priorities. I think in doing so, you really take full advantage of the fact that you have a resource like Nexus Consulting at your discretion, and hopefully you'll see the gains even come in stronger because you've focused your attention on these priorities this way. Thanks.
I want to add for everyone, I didn't mention, but we started by looking at what are the federal priorities for our partners. The very first bullet point, as one example, is adopted within the city of Flagstaff's federal priorities as well. So we did look at all of our partners locally and then also across our transit associations. And we pulled the things that are most impactful to our size agency in our community.
Heather, are you a part of the Alliance? Is NAPTA a part of the Alliance?
Yes.
So that really does that does bring it all together, because that's certainly a goal of the alliance agencies to, to direct our federal and state lobbying efforts to the greatest extent possible in alignment with each other. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Heather? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Thanks, Heather. Next item is consider an off-budget application to the low or no emission grant program, Busy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the TAC, Busy Collins Transit Planner. And this month I'll be asking the board to approve an off-budget application for the low or no emission grant program through the Federal Transit Administration. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And I've been talking with you all a lot about our ZEB transition plan, zero emission bus transition plan. And now we're in the implementation stage. It's really exciting. So, looking at what we do have funded is 2 battery electric buses and chargers and associated utility infrastructure at the Downtown Connection Center. And that was funded through the Bus and Bus Facilities grant that was awarded in 2019. However, there's so many more components just to support these 2 first electric buses, and that is listed here. So what is unfunded, and we are proposing to request in this low and no emission grant program, are chargers and associated utility infrastructure at Caspar Drive, so the Mountain Line headquarters, and battery charge management software. So this would tell us what the state of charge of buses are, and cost, some various details on a software program, connecting the bus with dispatch and letting us understand what's going on in the bus. And also we're looking at a maintenance package that includes diagnostic and maintenance tools that are specific for electric buses, but also renovation upgrades to some of our maintenance shops that would support all of our low emission buses. We do currently have a complete fleet of hybrid electric buses, and we do think that this is in line with the low or no emission grant program. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And here is the budget of the grant proposal that we've put together. So the chargers, that amount is for 3 chargers plus utility infrastructure that's needed to support those chargers at Caspar Drive. And then, going down, definitely the large ticket item here is that maintenance package. So we had some renovations to some other facilities at Caspar Drive, but we're really looking at, 3 of our maintenance shops on site that could really help support the rest of our fleet, and also set us up in a really good way for potentially future electric buses. So it's a great use of funds for state of good repair. Just as an example, one of our maintenance shops, the maintenance shop, I should say, where the maintenance bays are, our articulated buses stick out when they're being serviced. They don't even fit in shop 0. And, so a third of the bus is sticking out. The doors have to stay open in cold weather. It's not a good use of electricity funds to, be heating up that space. Staff need to complete work within 1 day so they can close up the shop and keep it, safe and secure overnight. Definitely a lot of room for improvement. And this is just, due to incredible growth of the Mountain Line system. So we're just kind of catching up on that maintenance component, the facilities, to make sure we can truly support our buses. And then there's also technical support from Center for Transportation and the Environment. That's the last item listed here. And CTE has worked with us on the ZEB transition plan and can provide some really great technical support as we go through just this first little implementation of that ZEB transition plan. And so what is proposed is an overall grant of $7.6 million, and it is eligible for 90% federal match. So we are looking at a little under 800,000 for local match. Excuse me. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And the FTA requires scaled funding options should funding not be sufficient to cover all of their proposals that they would like to award. And so we are proposing 2 different funding options. So there's the complete package, which was shown on the previous slide. And then we have our 2 scaled options listed here. And so the first option would be a higher local contribution. And we are proposing to match it at 20% versus the required 10% local match. And so that does double the local match to 1.5 million. And the second option would be just the minimum request to be successful. So basically taking off that full maintenance package and just requesting infrastructure to support electric buses. And so that would, under that maintenance package, it would just include diagnostic and maintenance tools specific to electric buses. And so that does reduce the grant down to just under 2 million with the $200,000 local match. We would propose in that scaled funding option number 2 to have 10% local match. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And we are in discussions with Arizona Public Service, APS, for any sort of local contribution from them. There is an incentive that's currently available through APS that would credit Mountain Line back for a portion of the electric costs over a 6-year period. So there's a formula, they identify what that funding would be 6 years out. They reassess, at 3 years, at 5 years, to make sure that funding amount is correct. But we are at least anticipating that amount, which has yet to be determined, but we have been talking with APS about what the sweet spot is, if we could get that full 10% local match just for the chargers, which is about 150,000. That's a really sweet spot. So we're trying to work through this, but have a great relationship with APS and do anticipate getting a letter of support and some local match from them identified. That is yet to be finalized. But if that is achieved, then it can reduce Mountain Line's share of the local match. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Busy. Questions, comments? Giving folks time. Okay, not seeing any. Yeah, the maintenance is a big portion of that, so good luck.
Thank you.
All right, next
That's
on.
exciting.
Is that?
Just wanted to add
Hi,
it.
Lucinda, yeah. Yeah, I think we were just talking in an earlier meeting today. I think a lot of times people forget, they think about the buses, they think about the charger, but that maintenance is a huge part of it. Our current providers don't have the tools, the equipment, all that's needed to do that. Even the training. Did that package include training for the maintenance staff as well?
It does, yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's, your staff might have some experience because of your hybrids, but I think the electric buses are a whole new world. So any final thoughts, comments? Oh, I see a hand. Shane, see, I got you.
Busy, just curious, back a few slides, you had a couple of options, option 1 and option 2. Was staff recommending one or the other?
Ideally, we will get that full package, member Dilly. That is what we're hoping for. And, really just trying to give FTA options for funding that will take, certain amount of funds that's available under your discretion, FTA. So we don't have, my preference is the full package listed here.
And we don't have the local match identified right now?
We do. So we have local match. It was included. So the chargers and let's say electric bus specific components of that request are identified in the FY22 budget, and the maintenance facility will be identified in the FY23 budget. That is when we would anticipate construction of the maintenance facility.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Seeing no other hands, hearing nothing else, we will move on, but we will keep busy here. Next item is consider a formal pause to the bus rapid transit BRT project.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So another topic that I've been talking with you all for many months now about is the bus rapid transit BRT project. And, you know, I don't think any of these bullets listed here are surprises to anyone in this meeting. I mean, we have been delayed. So the BRT project and the ADOT Milton Road Corridor Master Plan, CMP, have, you know, been in lockstep, and the outcome of the CMP will be incorporated into the BRT on that portion of Milton Road that we overlap. These projects overlap, and so BRT has been on pause for over a year now. Looks like a year and 3 months about, as we wait for the outcome of the CMP on Milton Road. And, you know, we do have a recommended alternative identified. However, there's still many components that are being discussed with project partners. We did just have a meeting a couple weeks ago with ADOT, got through about half of the spot improvements for that no build alternative. I think we have about half of spot improvements left to discuss. So, you know, continuing to be delayed, and our project just is paused, waiting for that outcome. The no build hybrid alternative, it may be a really great bike and pedestrian project, you know, depending on the spot improvements that are included. And in that case, Mountain Line would be looking at our project partners to fund that local match for bike and ped improvements. And at this time, due to COVID impacts, the city is not able to commit financially to those improvements. And that definitely, that's a challenge. I think funding all over the place, as the next bullet lists, you know, Mountain Line, we don't have, outside of the project development for BRT, we don't have funds to operate or capital dollars to construct. And we would be looking for a transit tax increase to support our application into the CIG program to get the BRT funded. And 2022 may not be the time, 2024 may be the time. There's basically, I'm building up to the timing for the BRT project has just been very challenging. And maybe the time is not right now. So next slide, please, Rhonda. So staff is recommending to the board this month to have a formal pause on the BRT project and shift the remaining funds, which is about 1.35 million, to another eligible project. So due to the timing constraints that I mentioned earlier, we do see a path forward. We did speak with the FTA about this concept of formally pausing the BRT, and they were very supportive. You know, there's an eligible project that would be incredibly beneficial to the Mountain Line system currently and in the future, and very beneficial. It was a major component for the BRT project, and that is the signal at Phoenix Avenue and Milton Road. So this is an eligible project that we could shift the funds to, and they are in favor. They're supportive. I will say they will. FTA is supportive of this. Of course, they would love to see our BRT project submitted, funded, you know, move through that CIG process. They understand the constraints we're under. And they did confirm that when the timing is right, when all the stars are aligned with the various components of the BRT, that there will be no prejudice in seeking re-entry into that capital investments grant or CIG program. for a future BRT. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And so if the formal pause on the BRT is approved by the board, the next steps would be to work with AECom, who has been the consultant on the BRT project, to finalize BRT documents and really button that up in a great way that does set us up for success on a future CIG application if and when we start on a BRT project. We would be required to send a formal request to FTA to withdraw from the CIG program, and then work with FTA to shift the remaining funds to the signal at Phoenix Avenue and Milton Road. Rhonda, I think there's one more slide, maybe not. Next slide, please. Nope, that's it. So that's what we're looking at right now. I'm really sad to see the BRT go, but I think it's a really great next step for a project. The signal at Phoenix Avenue is incredibly helpful and the best use of our funds to shift from. So I don't think the BRT is going away forever. It's definitely been identified in multiple 5-year transit plans. I do see us revisiting the idea through the 5-year transit plan update that will be conducted over this year, and really gauge the community on, are they supportive of a transit tax increase for a BRT? Is the BRT alignment that we've identified the best possible alignment? Really, I think garner great support and communication with the community before, so we can take the next step in our BRT plans. And with that, I'd love to answer any questions. Thank you.
And there are a couple of hands, Dave and then Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the update, Busy. Glad to hear that you're going to be addressing this in the 5-year transit plan update. Given what you've seen out of the Milton Corridor Master Plan process, what are some of the criteria that you would want to look at to help determine when the time is ripe for bringing the BRT back into the forefront?
Thanks, Dave. I would say, Milton Road is going to be a part of a BRT project no matter what, and having that, really understanding what are ADOT's plans, I think is the largest barrier for us currently. So letting that process really play out, and to its fullest extent, that it's completely finished. And, I think ADOT has talked about, various components that may take some time. They've talked about perhaps having the city formally adopt or approve the Milton CMP, and perhaps have some sort of agreement between ADOT and project partners that, the TIA, the traffic impact analysis that ADOT conducts on roads, that will completely match the CMP outcomes. Sometimes that's not the case. And so I think, absolutely having the ADOT CMP completed and a very clear picture of what is possible on Milton Road and what is not possible on Milton Road, I think really needs to be crystal clear for Mountain Line. A second component is, I think, funding, making sure that we have a community supported and funded project is critical. I think our community and our project partners absolutely do support the BRT as proposed. However, we do need transit tax increase to sustain that BRT into the future. So, and then make sure COVID impacts on the community, on our project partners, that where we do have partnership opportunities and funding opportunities with each other on this BRT project, that we can all fully capitalize on the opportunity available that CIG provides. I mean, it's an incredible funding source for our community. It can really transform the corridor, the BRT corridor, bike, ped, transit improvements. So just make sure, I think those are the main components that we would like to see resolved before we revisit the BRT project.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Busy. So just my question is this. Is this BRT funding that you would be returning? Is it strictly for study, or can it be put to other uses?
Thank you, Member Dilly. It is planning funds. It's not, let's see, it's design and engineering. So not planning, I apologize. It's design and engineering funds. And we would not be losing those funds. We would be shifting them. So it is very important to Mountain Line to keep those funds within the community. We are looking at 1.35 million that remains in that design and engineering for BRT that we can keep in the community, shift to another very beneficial project for Mountain Line and for a future BRT on Milton.
Thank you, Busy. I'll get a little more specific then with my question. I'm wondering, could some of these funds help offset costs incurred on the design and engineering for the Casper intersection project for Mountain Line? Thank you.
Do you want me to jump in on that, Busy?
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, great question, Member Dilly. We've definitely had this conversation internally. When we talked to FTA, they wanted us to keep the funds within the scope of the original project. So they really wanted something that would support a future BRT, because the award was as a competitive award to that project. So they didn't like the idea of moving it to something totally off base. So that's where the Phoenix Avenue signal really comes in, because that would be a component of the future BRT or of a future BRT. And so they felt like that was still in line with the way the competitive grant was originally awarded to Mountain Line.
So Kate, I'll drill in a little bit on it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the impetus in support of the Casper intersection improvements is entirely to an operational benefit for Mountain Line. The downtimes, I don't know what you guys call it. Deadhead. Thank you. That I was thinking skinhead, but that didn't really work. Anyway, deadhead issues that you're trying to address by making that efficiency improvement, to me, would support your responsiveness as an operation to a BRT. So I ask again, are there funds there that could be applied to help with some of the problems that we're experiencing in getting that project across the finish line? Thank you.
I think so. The BRT is technically a corridor that's been identified, and that Caspar intersection is not a part of the corridor project. I think that's the nuance there. I do think there could be opportunity to find. My reaction would be, let's keep this clean and simple for FTA and stick with the Phoenix Avenue and what's part of the identified corridor of the BRT. But obviously, finding funds to help with the overall Downtown Connection Center project could help Mountain Line find other funds to help support the Caspar intersection. But I would say it's best to keep this grant clean. But obviously, as we find money, that potentially opens up revenues elsewhere.
Thank you, Kate. I'm just exploring.
Yep.
Jillian.
Does the delay on the Milton Road Corridor project affect University Drive project?
I don't believe so. That's a great question.
I can take that one as well. So the city is actually just contacted us last week that they're kicking off the University Drive Beulah project at Milltown. Mountain Line still keeps about $250,000 in the budget for the bus only lanes there. And we would still like to pursue those bus only lanes. That is what we told the city. They would again support a future BRT project, and likely we would spend nearly as much money building bus pullouts that would probably be required if there weren't bus only lanes. So we have asked the city to provide an updated budget. That those numbers are 3 or 4 years old at this point. We also asked them how long their projections for how long those could stay bus only lanes before they would need to be converted to general traffic are. And once we have those two key pieces of information, what's the new price and how long does the city anticipate they can be dedicated to transit before they become general purpose, then we can make a full decision. But we are excited to hear that project move forward and hopefully have an update here in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, can we go back a couple slides? There was a slide that Busy you talked about the city, maybe one more slide. Yeah, so on this one's it says the city's not able to financially commit due to COVID impacts. But I'm just wondering, the city previously hadn't committed funds, right? Like this isn't because of COVID, we're not changing things, but was this just an avenue to see how we could keep the project going? And so you mentioned that the city can't commit financially. I just don't want to put the city on the spot where it's like, oh, the city couldn't help and so we're killing the project.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate that question, Member Tressler. No. So as the Milton Corridor Master Plan has evolved, it's really the Milton portion of the BRT seems to be at best a bike and ped project. We're really not seeing a lot of transit improvements. You know, we're in mixed traffic. We would still be most likely required to have the pullouts along Milton. You know, at best, what could change would be a transit signal priority on the signals. That is yet to be determined through the spot improvements. It's been identified on the lists and so far seems to be moving through that conversation positively. So that is a benefit, but there's, you know, we had proposed side bus bike right turn lanes or a center running BRT. And so kind of those larger infrastructure improvements specifically for transit, you know, are well within the purview for Mountain Line to support. And as it shifts more towards a bike and pedestrian project, there isn't a great benefit to transit operationally to assist with frequency moving through traffic quicker. And so this is where the bike and peds component is great. It's positive. I'd love to see that on Milton. I'd love to see that. But we would be looking to our partners to fund that since there isn't a tremendous amount of transit within the project. So we're not looking for, you know, the full BRT. Say we have a full BRT and we apply for it, that full 20% local match would not fall on our partners. Mountain Line would definitely be paying for the majority of that, but we would be looking for our partners' support to make those dollars go a lot farther, leverage those funds to, you know, have 3 miles of bike lanes connecting into the BRT and up to a half mile outside of the BRT corridor being ped projects. You know, we would be looking to project partners to help capitalize on those opportunities.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Don't go anywhere, Busy. Dave.
Yeah, Busy. Thank you for that explanation to Christopher there. I'm wondering if you might want to clarify that bullet then in your presentation.
Thank you.
It's a little confusing as to, are you talking about the alternative in the CMP? Or are you talking about the BRT alternative? So just a little clarification there, I think would help with your presentation to the board.
Thank you, I will. Thank you.
Shane.
Thanks again. And Chris, thanks for bringing a little bit of focus to that. Busy, I am curious, is that like an official statement from the city that we're not financially participating due to COVID impacts?
So this has very much been, I mean, we have not had, you know, there has not been a formal request on such a thing, just based on the recession phases that the city has moved, you know, in and out of, just being mindful of what might be available.
I'm wondering and then if it wouldn't be best just to, you know, just to, well, I guess I'm wondering why the focus on the city then on that bullet point.
I think we could make the modification to just say partnerships are challenging right now, and that might be more, yeah, take the focus off the city per the previous couple comments. And I think it's applicable to say all partnerships are hard for us to pursue at the moment.
If that adjustment is an appropriate one to make, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Busy?
None other than to thank her for her hard work on all of this. Thanks, Busy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Busy. Next item, Kate, consider the Downtown Connection Center programming.
Thank you, Chair, members of the TAC. Wait for the PowerPoint here for a moment. So just wanted to provide an update to TAC and board this month on where we are with the Downtown Connection Center. I have a couple concepts to show you. And then ultimately, we're looking at a potential conversation with City Council on the Downtown Connection Center at the end of the month. So just wanted to bring the concepts forward to our team first. And that meeting is pending some internal city approval still, but wanted to be out ahead of it. Next slide. So you may recall from previous meetings that this was probably the last concept you've seen, and it may not have been this exact rendering, but if I can orient you to it real quick. Over on the far western side there is Milton Avenue, and then very far eastern is Beaver Street, and you can see that small parking lot that it currently exists along Beaver Street. And then just to the north of the red building that you see is the railroad tracks, to give you a sense of the layout of the property. This was a concept we moved forward with for a couple reasons. One, you can see that there's all the bus bays that we need for future planning and good maneuvering and safe pedestrian access in and out of that facility. We were trying to maximize parking available on the site because there currently is public parking there. So we left a large portion of the property open with the idea of a potential public-private partnership to go multi-story with that parking garage or with another facility there that could really maximize that space. The Rio de Flag runs through the middle of this property, mostly where the bus bays are and the active civic space that you see. It's a big easement that limits private development or the ability to really go vertical on the vast majority of the property. So we were trying to design around the Rio de Flag and to maximize parking. And honestly, I think this concept does a very good job of that. But we continue to have some risks, particularly related to the Rio de Flag. And the city has been very clear that that's their #1 project. And we need to do everything we can to minimize DCC impacts on the Rio de Flag. And so we're switching towards another concept. Can I go to next slide, Rhonda? We're switching towards another concept for a couple of reasons. #1 is there's that Rio de Flag is the #1 city priority, and the timing of the Rio is still unknown. The concept we have is very integrated with the Rio, and so delays on the Rio impact the DCC, and therefore how much funding we have as we delayed, or what that amount of funding can actually deliver as we delay. And also want to make progress on the grant for FTA. There's no formal requirement, but it keeps us in good standing to show progress. And while we have such a large grant outstanding, it might be less likely for us to receive other large grants to pursue other priorities of the organization. So the concept I'm about to show you reduces that risk to mountain line and Rio coordination by moving us as far as we can out of the way of the Rio. And I just want to say, despite all these challenges that we're having in the design of the project, this site is still the site where we believe we need to be. We did site analysis early, looked at a lot of properties. There are just not many options in the downtown area that allow for the bus maneuvering that we need to occur. Their size just isn't adequate, or their shape combined with their size isn't adequate. So next slide. So this is obviously a rough drawing, and we're still working through this newly designed concept. So I don't have anything nicer at this stage, but will over the next couple of weeks. But the big changes here, you see the DCC has moved the building is now the yellow block. It's moved all the way to the west along Milton Avenue to get as far out of the Rio de Flag as possible. I see Shane's excited about that. Thanks, Shane. And that means we can build that building at any time. There's no delays. Mountain Line could build that building next year as soon as we get our permits in hand. The parking area that you see there will probably move some of that parking to the north and shrink that area so that we can elongate the bus plaza from what you see here to make the parking area up by the railroad tracks now a little bit wider and accommodate more. And the bus bays would basically get longer in order to do that. So a little bit of shifting there. You see, we're still trying to retain some civic space. It's definitely something that's sacrificed through this design over the previous design. But again, there's that big reduction in risk to Mountain Line related to the Rio de Flag. And so you do see that trade. I think that's the big trade-off that you see in this scenario. And then you see we retain that parking lot still over along Beaver Street in this. So there's a lot more to work through. Obviously, we're still playing with the big puzzle pieces and how they all fit on the property. I would also say our calculations thus far don't gain us any additional parking over the previous slide. But again, there's that trade-off to get out of the way of the Rio de Flag as much as possible and not be coordinating that project. Next slide. So that's the big concept pieces. I wanted to talk through where we are on some of the partnerships real quick. The first one is a police substation. It's one office and a parking space. It's very low risk to Mountain Line and the overall value of the project. And we see a lot of value in having a police presence at the DCC. So it's something that we're pursuing. We hope to make an agreement with the police department for some additional presence within the Mountain Line bus system, but we're happy to move this forward and even just have their presence at the Downtown Connection Center with us. Metro Plan's interested in about 4 office spaces. This is also fairly low risk because of the size. They do have capital funding that they would like to bring to the overall project to reduce their O&M costs. So that's something that we're pursuing is with Metro Plan, but again, a fairly low risk item. Economic Vitality, however, has an interest in some more significant office space. It's a bigger percentage of the building and so becomes a little more costly and higher risk to Mountain Line to pursue unless there is a formal agreement in place. However, there are some benefits to pursuing the relationship anyways. If it benefits a partner agency, obviously that's good for Mountain Line and our partners. And then also without the economic vitality space, a significant portion of the building is reduced. And so some of the form-based items that planning and zoning likes to see, and for scale and the presence of the facility, it might look a little undersized for the property we have. That doesn't necessarily mean it's worth doing anyways. Those are, but there is a little bit of benefit in doing that. So we are working on getting the city some numbers that they can contemplate for what partnerships would look like to be able to decide if that's worth continuing to pursue or not. And then the last partnership is the human service agencies. It's about $500,000 to build a 1,000 square foot area of the building. That would be a separate tenant lease space where human service agencies could occupy this. It could be rented to other third parties if we can't identify human service agencies to go in there. But we would really like this scenario to be something where we could partner with an umbrella organization like United Way or like County Health and Human Services to manage that space and allow human service agencies to serve people directly at the Downtown Connection Center. So that's still something we're pursuing as well. I see a lot of hands, Madam Chair. Do you want me to pause?
That'd be great. Let's go Shane, then Gail, then Dave.
Kate, thank you. Specific to the partnership opportunities, you've put forth a Herculean effort to to poll the community and your various community partners for opportunities. So I wanted to first acknowledge that effort. I did want to ask, if it sounds like we're pretty much on the same, pretty much a done deal on the police station, an office and a parking spot, not that big of a deal. I wonder, have you tapped FMC on what's the name of their? I'm sorry, I forget the name. Guardian. Sorry, Guardian. As a possible staging site, not living quarters, not a 24/7 thing, but to have a place to post an ambulance. I'm wondering. Let me know about that effort. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I had one non-formal conversation with Guardian. They do say that they have high frequency visits to the downtown connection center area. And so are there often. It didn't sound like they wanted to stage out of there. But I do think it's a really good reminder to me to follow back up with Guardian and continue the conversation. Thank you.
I mean, particularly if you couple that conversation with them mentioning the fact that it looks like we are moving forward with having a police presence, that it might make sense to push that a little bit more. I know that the call volume downtown from an ambulance standpoint is a huge deal, and likely that's going to grow as your project moves forward and this becomes the operating foci for Mountain Line. So having that ambulatory service right there could be a big benefit to your operations as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I will follow up with them.
Yeah, even if they didn't want to stage there, it just might be good to keep that in mind so they have a place to park when they get there in case it's full. Gail.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kate, I have a question about the economic vitality. Are you looking to partner in terms of creating more economic vitality, or are you partnering with the City of Flagstaff Economic Vitality Division? And if it's the second, is it the whole division? Or could you just explain a little more what you mean by that bullet point, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it was more the second. We've had conversations with Dave McIntyre in particular because they currently lease space. So the idea or thought process from the economic vitality team is, could this actually result in a cost savings if we can figure out how to partner, because they said that their lease rates are fairly expensive right now. So it's very exploratory, but it is the idea of that division or portions of that division. I think if I recall off the top of my head, they were looking at about 20 office spaces. And I apologize, I don't know how big that division is to understand if that's half the division or the whole division, but I do know Park Flag is part of it.
Gotcha. And then in terms of partnerships, I'm just curious if you've had an opportunity to reach out to some of the shuttle buses and places like that as well. Like, I don't think FlixBus has any physical people here, but I know Flag Limo does. There's a lot of transportation companies. I was just wondering if you've connected with any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two main ones we've had conversations with so far are Greyhound and Amtrak. Amtrak is doing some track analysis to see if they're very interested, but there's the curvature of the track as it comes around the corner. So they have their rail team looking at it to see if it's a feasible spot for a new Amtrak facility, because they have some ADA issues at their current facility. Greyhound is very interested. They're supposed to get back to us next week. They own their property in town, and so they're trying to figure out what they might do with the other property if they were to partner with us. And then we talked with Heidi Hansen a bit about some of the tourist bus needs, and so we're looking at those components. We would love to see FlixBus, and if we can make all this happen and be a true connection center, we'd love to figure out how to bring FlixBus over and Groom Shuttle and some of the others as well. But I haven't reached out with some of the more private providers yet, but that is definitely of interest.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Kate.
And Kate, I've got contacts for both Groom and Flix if you need them. You may already have them, but Dave. Okay.
Can I get a window office? Oh, sorry. No, I'm just wanted to say I really appreciate several elements of the new concept. I think having that presence out on Milton and helping to frame that space from an urban design perspective is really valuable. Wondering on the east end, has there been thought or input from the city on flipping the parking lot into civic space so that, you know, Beaver Street is again framed by civic space and not just more asphalt?
That's a great question. We haven't made it that far through any conversations yet. We will meet with the city on the new concept next week, and that's a great point I can bring up. I think the new concept, before, there was definitely more of a perspective in my head of Mountain Line was doing very much most of the building and master planning on the site. As we move away from the Rio, it starts to become a question of me of or where the line is between what's Mountain Line building and what is the Rio de Flag we're putting back after the Rio de Flag comes in. So we'll have to work through some of those, but I agree that active space up on the street could be really nice.
Any other comments or questions for Kate? And you may have more in your presentation. I appreciate you taking a pause, noticing the hands and taking a pause.
I think I only have one or two more slides.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
Do next slide, Robin. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I think this last one, or one before. It's just the next, really the next steps. So we did hire, or we are in the process of hiring an owner's rep, Nations Group. They're based out of the Phoenix area to help us project manage the DCC and take over, many of these conversations we're having about relationship building. They have been working on the project for the past month under a notice to proceed at risk while we wait for final changes to the contract, but we're really excited to have them on board. We meet with city staff next week to confirm the approach on the new concept. And if there's agreement there, then we're aiming for that March 30th council update. If all goes well between these two things, we'll come back to the board likely in May with a new schedule, budget, and more refined concept for the board to look at. And honestly, it would be possible for us to proceed quite quickly. Nations Group thinks we could be constructing next summer, occupancy easily by 2023 with the new concept. So that is exciting. There's a lot of financial value to being able to move fast and not having costs continue to escalate on us, because our grant award doesn't grow as costs go up. So that's exciting. It's been helpful to have them on board and really push us in this direction to get the project done. So that is all I had.
Any final comments or questions for Kate? Okay, thanks, Kate. Next item, report on FY21 second quarter performance. Jim Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually lost without my Etch-a-Sketch. There it goes. Okay. Well, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the TAC. This is Jim Wagner reporting, Operations Director, and I'm here to present the second quarter performance report. Next slide, please. Thank you. Normally, we would have a much brighter outlook regarding passenger boardings and associated cost. The truth is, like other services across the continent, we continue to experience a reduction in ridership and increased cost. Since 2001, we were fortunate enough to experience strong, steady growth, which made us the envy of other transit systems. Since the beginning of the pandemic about a year ago, ridership has plummeted. At the conclusion of last fiscal year, we saw a decline in ridership of almost 15%. For this year, we're projecting to have a total ridership that is less than 50% of fiscal year 19. It's an awful lot. We found it necessary to reduce schedule from March 2020 through October of 2020. Backdoor boarding only, we suspended fare collection. We had put barriers up to protect our operators until we could produce some doors, security doors. We were able to resume front door boarding after October, increased schedule only after installing the security doors, barriers, and then fare collection resumed as well. During this time, the schools were using distance learning modes and hybrid schedules. Businesses are closed with many employees working from home. All these items mentioned support the reduction in ridership performance. And the same holds true for our paratransit division. Ridership is down. So at this point, I'm not convinced that ridership is the best performance metric to tell our story. Because as an example, we've kept 100% of our staff working throughout the pandemic. We've added scheduled touch point sanitizing at the Downtown Connection Center with nightly deep cleaning and sanitizing of revenue vehicles. So when they go out the next day, they've been totally cleaned and they're ready to go. Staff continue to maintain company equipment as outlined. They're meeting their goals. So for both facilities and fleet, their performance is at 100% currently. Route on-time performance is also very high, 95% range. Very good. And we are prepared to respond to schools once they reopen. That's happening as it seems right now. And we're ready to add the tripper and the deviation service as we need to. Next slide, please. Okay. The Mountain Line fixed route slide is just another representation of the ridership trends. This speaks volumes right here. You can see what we've done in the past compared to what we're doing today. You can see the slight uptick on ridership when NAU began in-person classes on August 31st. Mountain Line experienced a 21% increase in ridership for the weekday. Next slide, please. And this is the paratransit representation, and also goes to show you the trends we're really down. Next slide, Rhonda, please. So the city and county taxi rideshare programs are also down, but remain the primary choice for paratransit eligible customers. The rideshare program is popular, seeing an increase or recovery, if you will, and operates at a significantly lower cost than that of paratransit. Next slide, please. Oh, there's our city taxi. I should go on the next slide, please. And there's our county. You can see the trends there as well. Next slide for van pools. There we go. Thank you very much. The van pool program seems to be the least impacted. Let's go to the next slide. You can see as you look at it here, it's fairly steady, due in part to or by the user base. These people are those who cannot work from home, basically. It's predominantly, I think, is the healthcare staff, and they have to come into work, and they're from outlying areas like Williams or Winslow, that sort of thing. They have 5, sometimes 6 vehicles in service, and some of the capacity has decreased due to social distancing requirements. So they might have had 3 or 4 in the vehicle, and it's reduced down to maybe 3 or even 2 at times. So that's really about all I got. Next slide, Rhonda. So this being really down and quick and dirty, but it just shows where we have a decline across the board, just like many other cities out there. And any questions?
Questions for Jim? Seeing none. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Next up is Heather with a review policy structure and resolutions.
Good morning again. This is part of our board education effort. So next slide, Rhonda. So as brought up last month, we set up 3 different kind of board education pieces. We reviewed financial management policies last month. This month, we're talking more broadly about policy structure as well as the delegations of authority the board has previously adopted as resolutions. And really the importance here is making sure our new board members understand how decisions are made, and authorized. So I know the Trans Advisory Committee is familiar with many of these, so I may talk a little bit faster than I might for our board members, but rules of procedure, those are the rules that the board has adopted for our board of directors and our Transit Advisory Committee. They really help direct how those meetings are conducted, how membership is assigned, and what actions our board and TAC are authorized to take. Going from there to look more internal, we have our personnel policies, and there's several personnel policies per the staff report. We have our policy manual, which is our wide sweeping policies, and those are supported by some other more specific policies like our drug and alcohol testing policies. And we do have both an FTA for safety sensitive employees, and we have a non-FTA policy for folks that serve in non-safety sensitive. The Federal Transit Administration gives us very clear guidelines on when we test, what we test for those individuals that serve in kind of our revenue service positions, our drivers, our mechanics, anybody who could have that public impact if they were reporting under the influence. Separate from personnel policies, we do have our financial management policies, and I included again in the staff report a detailed list of these. One of the important financial management policies is like our advertising policy, which really allows us to say, we will or won't sell that advertising space based on these conditions or terms of the material that someone may be wanting to advertise. Without that policy, it's considered an open space, and it changes how we authorize the different advertisements. Our system policies are more about our riders. So this is like our Title VI policy, which says that we will provide those services without any regard to those protected categories. It also helps us determine how do we cut service if a service cut was necessary, or change services. So we have to go through different procedures under the Federal Transit Administration to remove service from someone or from some area, and our Title VI really helps us walk through how to do that. And then we have other system policies like our rider policies. How do you ride the bus and what behaviors are expected of you? That becomes very important when we want to suspend a rider or revoke their access to the system. We need to tell them what behaviors are expected and how we're going to treat them if those behaviors are violated. Moving from policies more into the resolutions and delegations of authority, next slide. The board has adopted in the past several resolutions which delegate authority. These are probably going to be new for many of our board members because the last time that we did these was in June of fiscal year 2020. So I wanted to go over these as we approach the budget cycle and make sure our new board members are familiar with, and of course, any TAC member who's not familiar with these things, it's always a good opportunity. So the board has authorized a delegation of signature authority, which really assigns to the CEO and general manager all signatures required for our federal funding opportunities. So that means our board chair does not have to sign off on every application for federal funds. They have delegated that authority to me. This is actually a Federal Transit Administration required document as part of our grant management. Separate from that, we do have the collective grant resolution, which is the board's authority again to myself and other staff members to pursue grant opportunities when those opportunities are within our budget, within our financial plan, and in our transportation improvement program or plan. If it's not in those documents, then we bring them separately, as you saw earlier in this meeting with Busy bringing the low-no application forward for the board. It is not in those documents, so therefore not covered by the collective grant resolution. Procurement resolution takes the permissions that are given under our procurement policy, which says $100,000 requires board approval. As one example, the board have gone one step further and signed a procurement resolution that says, well, actually, even if it's over $100,000, if it's in your budget, in your financial plan, and or supported by your grant resolution, then the CEO can authorize those procurements. So I can award them, I can sign their contracts. We continue to bring those to the board if there's contentious items. So if we feel like maybe a vendor is going to protest because they've participated in the process and have indicated, we would definitely bring that item to the board. The final one is the delegation of authority resolution. that delegation of authority resolution really allows the CEO and general manager to sign public and nonprofit agreements. So recently, the Alliance did have an agreement go around to add NEPTA as a member of the Alliance. This delegation of authority allowed me to sign that on behalf of Mountain Line versus bringing it to the board as a housekeeping item for the board to approve. The reason we did a lot of these resolutions and delegations is to ensure that the board is engaged in really high priority topics and discussions, and not to rubber stamp those items that are housekeeping or business process. Our goal is to ensure that the board remains informed and has the opportunity to provide comment or feedback. And as a result, we do provide updates. So I think one of the progress reports in your packet today is a delegation of authority progress report. And that progress report will contain the actions we've taken under any of these resolutions. Next slide. I think that was everything that I had on this particular education opportunity, but I'd be happy to go back and answer any questions.
Thanks, Heather. Comments or questions for Heather? Hearing none, seeing none. We will move on. And so a reminder for folks, progress reports are things that you guys would read on your own. If you had any questions, you could bring them up in the meeting. The one area we will ask Heather to speak to is a summary of current events.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to recognize that Shane has left the meeting.
Heather, we can't hear you.
Shane has left the meeting. Does that take us out of quorum, Rhonda?
No, it does not.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Perfect.
Thank you for that. Can you hear me okay now,
Yeah,
Rhonda?
that's better.
Oh, okay. I pulled my computer a little closer. I moved from standing to sitting. Sorry about that. All right. So a couple of current events, and we will send this full list out after the meeting as we did last month as well. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that our chair of our board of directors, Steve Peru, will be leaving our board due to his new appointment to Coconino County as the county manager. The board will have an opportunity to recognize him for his service and dedication at the upcoming board meeting. And potentially we could see Mr. Peru re-enter our Mountain Line businesses as our TAC representative. We will see what comes of that. So just wanted to recognize that and his service. A couple of quick COVID updates. So staff at Mountain Line are now eligible for the vaccine under the 1B priority groups, and we appreciate the support of our members and Coconino County in getting us added to those priority groups as essential staff. Right now, we have about 50% of our staff that's either scheduled for or has received the first vaccine. So that's great news. We're working through it. We continue to have some staff shortages, but right now we only have 2 to 3 staff members absent for COVID-related reasons, and all other staff have not only recovered, but returned to work. And we're very excited to report that. As you may recall, we were at 1.20% down. On the mask mandate, we continue to see compliance on our request to put the mask on, so very little conflict for the operators. We did receive from FTA confirmation on how to handle masking and under the ADA. So there was some concern that the ADA exemption can be pretty broad on case by case. We actually have learned that we can require a lot more from the masking mandate ADA exemption than we would in a normal situation. However, we really have felt like we don't need to do anything different than what we're doing because people are complying and we're not seeing conflicts. But we're glad to know that that tool is there if we need it because people are abusing that exemption. Couple updates in our operations division. We're finally making progress to implement all backup cameras across all of our revenue fleet. That project was put on hold when we started having some absenteeism issues. And our fleet team is currently working to complete the mid-life maintenance and refurbishment of our articulated bus drive units. So that put us back on schedule to get those completed by the end of the fiscal year. I want to highlight a couple partnership opportunities. We're working with the Flagstaff Family Help Center on our human trafficking awareness campaign, and they have recently provided us with quick reference cards for our drivers, which we think is going to be a great tool out in our community to help identify and offer assistance when needed under that human trafficking awareness campaign. City Mountain Line staff are meeting with the City of Flagstaff community development team next week to talk more about how we can participate in the development agreement and or process. So it's a big step forward from where we were at a month ago, if you'll remember, with Sky Cottages and some concerns on that development agreement. We are taking an update to the City Council on March 30th regarding the Downtown Connection Center. It'll be the first time we've been before City Council in several months. And then we are participating in the Take Charge Arizona program through APS and installing electric vehicle charging stations at our facility that will be available to both visiting public member or visiting guests and our employees. And we are not going to be charging for that. So it will be provided as a benefit to our employees. And we're pretty excited to see that come to fruition. And we've had some employees express interest in it. So that's really great. Quick update. I have two more quick updates. Staff are working on several funding applications, federal funding applications to support our capital and planning needs. We're expecting to submit as many as 6 applications for upwards of $13 million. And those projects support our electrification of our fleet, a CDL course, that's partnership with Northern Arizona University, expanded maintenance shop at Caspar. Our articulated buses, if you've never seen it, hang out of our bus bays while we're maintaining them. So our mechanics are very excited to see us pursue that. And then for our employees and morale, Transit Employee Appreciation Day is March 18th. Last year, we had a big event plan that we ended up doing very low key. It will be low key again this year, but we will be celebrating our team members. We're having coffee delivery to our buildings. We're hanging a banner downtown to encourage the public to recognize them and thank them. And then we will be having a social media celebration of different team members. So invite you to participate in that. And those are my very quick current event updates.
Thanks, Heather. Comments, questions for Heather? It is our last agenda item, so last call. Seeing none, thank you, Heather. Our next meeting is Thursday, April 1st. No joke, we'll have to do something funny that day, just because, sorry. With that, if there's no other comments or questions, meeting adjourned.